we're now going to move our focus onto the past tense. So in this Mastering the Basics lesson, we're going to look at the past simple tense and the past continuous. This really is considered one of the most important and essential tenses to use within speaking, and it's probably one that we use a lot. It's a common tense, and it probably is a bit easier to use than, say, for example, some of the perfect forms. However, that doesn't mean that students still make mistakes in forming this tense. So we'll go from the basics of how we make them and then look at question forms and other things as well. So definitely a really important lesson. And of course, as always, any questions, please do drop me a message in the Q&A section. And we'll of course begin with the past simple. But before that, I would like to look at past tense with the verb to be, the be verb. So here we have our subject pronouns on the left, beginning with I. So if we are to use the verb to be, we change this into the past tense with I was. And here we have our third person singular pronouns, he, she, and it. And again, we use was. And then we're on to either you, we, they, or the plus plural noun, boys, cats, that kind of thing. And then we need to use were. So the verb to be, it becomes were in the past tense. Let's look at some examples of this. I was afraid. That's just a simple example. I is the subject, and here we have the verb was and afraid. This is my object of sorts in this sentence. She was quite sick yesterday. The tree wasn't very tall. Now, I've underlined the negative form of was not, contraction, wasn't. The tree wasn't very tall. Therefore, the tree was quite short. It was quite small. Okay, so we've seen was. How about were? My friends were all at the park. My friends were all at the park. So here we have the subject pronoun friends. And this is, of course, plural because we've added the S. My friends were all at the park. Here we have the negative contraction of were. We weren't lost in town. So here we have some examples of forming past tense using the verb to be. Just have to be careful with using either was, wasn't, or were and weren't. Okay, let's jump into past tense simple. So we use the past tense simple to talk about an action or event in the past that has finished. And we do this with subject plus verb, V2, the past tense verb, and the object. He listened to Spotify this morning. We jumped over the wall. And I've highlighted the subject, the verbs, and the object. It's important to note and also remember, thinking back to our verb lessons, about regular and irregular verbs. Both verbs here are regular verbs. We've just added ed. Okay, so if we want to make past tense simple in the negative form, simply add did not, contraction, didn't. Subject plus didn't, and then remember to use the simple verb form, V1. We don't need to add ed or change to the past tense. Then add the object. Here's an example. He didn't listen to Spotify this morning. Now, a common mistake some students make, even quite fluent students, would be to add an ed onto our verb listen. He didn't listen to Spotify this morning. Of course, that would be incorrect, although completely understandable why students would do this, because sometimes we can overuse a rule. I didn't call my auntie on the phone. Again, remember not to add into the past tense form. We use V1, the first form of the verb. Okay, so pretty straightforward. But just be careful with accuracy, especially when speaking, to make sure that we're showing off our native fluency. Okay, and how about in question form? So we can use these 6 W's. We don't always have to, but they are good for starting questions. And then plus did, plus our pronouns, subject pronouns, and then simple verb forms. Why did she travel to England? When did they see the movie? We could also simply say, did they see the movie? So we don't have to use the 6 W's in forming these questions. Okay, pretty straightforward. Obviously, our starting verb here, did, is in the past tense of the verb do. Did plus pronoun plus V1. That is how we create questions in the past tense simple. Okay, so moving on, slightly more advanced, but again, really important to have a really strong understanding. Past continuous, of course. And we use this tense when talking about an action in the past that was ongoing. It took a duration of time. However, now that has finished. So in the pronouns I, he, she, it, we have subject plus was or wasn't for the negative plus verb ing plus the gerund. She wasn't watching the TV before. The new book wasn't selling many copies. Okay, and onto a different pronoun. We have you, we, and they. This is when we would use were or weren't. We weren't leaving work early. Kim and Rob weren't dating anymore. So we're talking about past events that were ongoing before but have now finished, or finished in the past. Okay, let's take a look at forming questions in the past continuous. So, as always, 6 W's to begin if you like, and then we need to add our was or were depending on the subject pronouns as listed here. And then simply we add verb ing. Here's a couple of examples. Why were you shouting? And here we have an example without the 6 W's. Was he studying last week? So beginning with was he studying last week? And that's a perfectly good example without the 6 W's. Okay, so that's a run through of past simple and past continuous. They are more simple in terms of forming and in use. However, just be careful with accuracy. So let's jump into the animated part of the video and see a load more examples.